Well, good morning. Here we are, February the 13th, halfway through the month already. As we continue our study in Daniel, we're in Daniel chapter 6, verses 10 through 24, and it's trust. Trust exhibited. Trust exhibited. Trust meaning having confidence in something or belief in something or something or someone you can count on. Believers can trust God in all circumstances. Believers can have confidence in God, have belief in God, can count on God in all circumstances. As I said, today's lesson takes place in chapter 6. Last week we were in chapter 4, but I want to just highlight a little bit of chapter 5 because it's interesting. Chapter 5 starts with a new king of Babylon, Belshazzar, however, and where we find him, Nebuchadnezzar has died. Like I said last week, he died in about 562 BC. So we have Belshazzar here, and he's given a big banquet for all of his big dignitaries. And he gets the idea of getting the cups that Nebuchadnezzar had stolen from the temple of Jerusalem, bringing them in, filling them with wine and drinking toast to their various gods, their idols. They were made out of gold and silver and bronze and iron and stone and wood. And so he thought, that's a neat idea. So we have the lesson or the study here where if you're familiar with Daniel and his visions, this is where the hand appears and writes on the wall. And so they're in the middle of giving all this toast and everything, Belshazzar and all his cronies. And all of a sudden a hand appears and a finger starts writing on the wall. And this freaks everybody out. In fact, in verse 6, it talks about how the king, his face turned pale with fear and sheer terror gripped him so that his knees knocked together and his legs gave way underneath him. So here we have this hand all of a sudden appear as writing on the wall. Well, he gets all of his astrologers, his magicians, and all these guys, counselors, and tells them that he'll reward them handsomely if they figure out what's it saying. And so nobody can figure out. Well, it says the queen mother, so I guess that's his mom, comes in, and she says, hey, listen, there's a guy that Nebuchadnezzar had that is really wise, and his name's Daniel. And she said that, he was able to interpret dreams. So they call for Daniel. And Belshazzar says, if you can figure this out, I'll reward you handsomely. And Daniel says, listen, you can keep your stuff. I don't need it. Give it to somebody else, but I'll decipher who it is. And so basically what it says is that Daniel's chastising Belshazzar, saying, Nebuchadnezzar went through a deal where he thought he was the most high mighty of anything or anyone. And God got his attention and drove him out to where he actually acted like a cow, grazing and stuff. But he came to his senses. And he says, this is your warning, Belshazzar, that you need to get your act together too. And so he says, toward the end, in verse 25 and on, it says, this is the message that was written. Mene, tekel, parsin, P-A-R-S-I-N, parsin. And it says, this is what the words mean. Many means numbers. God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel means weighed. You have been weighed on the balances and have failed the test. And parsin means divided. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. And so he rewards Daniel with all these things. But it says in verse 30 and 31, that very night Belshazzar, the Babylonian king, was killed. and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. Now, this is where we pick up our story today, chapter 6. And it's Daniel's in the lion's den. And so Darius the Mede is in control of Babylon now. And what he does is divide his kingdom into 120 provinces. And he assigns a prince over each province, but then he divides that 120 provinces. He assigns 3 administrators, and one of them was Daniel, to govern over those princes, to be sure that the king wasn't wasn't messed over with, that his directions were fulfilled, and so to watch out for the king's interests. I'll get out here in a minute. And so Daniel, it says in verse 3, Daniel soon proved himself more capable than all the other administrators and princes. Now, that shouldn't surprise us. At this time, Daniel was about 80 years old, and he had already gone through 5 kings of Babylon, 5 Babylonian kings. Now he was serving a Mede king, and in the end, toward his ministry, he served a Persian king. So right now, Darius the Mede is in control, and Daniel has proven himself again and again how valuable and honest and reliable he is, and it's all due to his relationship with God. God has left Daniel in this position for now upward to 80 years, and he goes beyond that, Daniel serving the one true God, and having an alliance with these various kings, to where they depended upon him, they relied upon him, they trusted him. And this is all due to his relationship with God. He stayed true to God. And so, as the story goes on, some of these princes was jealous of Daniel. And so they plotted against him. But it says here, then other administrators and princes began searching for some fault in the way that Daniel was handling his affairs, but they couldn't find anything. He was too above board and honest to where they couldn't catch him in any deceitful thing. But then they said, well, maybe there is a way. It says our only chance is to find grounds for accusing Daniel will be in connection with his requirements of his religion. So they're saying, listen, Daniel is such a devout person to his God. This is the only way we can trap him. So they think of this idea, and they go before the king, and they give this false, long-lived King Darius, which is the normal greeting, but these guys had ulterior motives. And so they tell the king, she says, you know, king, as great as you are, now this is my interpretation, as great as you are, you need to make a declaration for 30 days that no one, it says, make a law that will be strictly enforced. Give orders that for the next 30 days, anyone who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to your majesty, will be thrown to the lions. And let your majesty issue and sign this law so it cannot be changed. A law of the Medes and Persians which cannot be revoked. So King Darius signed the law. He was being duped, being conned by these guys. They knew the relationship that the king had with Daniel, but the king wasn't thinking right then. And he thought, hey, that's a pretty good idea. This will prove that whoever doesn't honor me is a possible enemy of mine. He's not loyal, not true. So he signs it. And the catch is that once a law by the king was put on the books, it was you can't get rid of it. Not erasable. it went to the time length of 30 days, and nothing could change it, not even a king. It was written in stone, if you were. And so this is where we pick up the story. The first part of the story is the trap set. This is Daniel 6, verses 10 through 14. It says, but when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, now he had no part of it. He didn't know what was going on, but he heard about it. It said he went home and knelt down as usual in his upstairs room with its windows open toward Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to God. So even though Daniel knew about this, it did not change his mind whatsoever. It had been so easy for him to say, well, I can go 30 days without praying or spending time with God, or I can do it secretly, maybe once a day, change up my times. I can get around that. But no, he stayed true to his routine, which was worshiping God 3 times a day. And so verse 11 says, the officials went together to Daniel's house and found him praying and asking for God's help. So they went back to the king and reminded him about his law. Did you not sign a law, these guys talking to the king, did you not sign a law that for the next 30 days, anyone who prays to anyone, divine or human, except your majesty, will be thrown to the lions? And of course the king says, yeah, you were there. You're the ones that brought it to me. You saw me sign it. Said, yes, that decision stands. It is the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked. Verse 13. Then they told the king, that man Daniel, one of the captives from Judah, is paying no attention to you or your laws. He still praises God 3 times a day. Verse 14. Hearing this, the king was very angry with himself for signing the law, and he tried to find a way to save Daniel. He spent the rest of the day looking for a way to get Daniel out of his predicament. So here the trap has been set. These princes and everything, con the king into signing this decree for 30 days, knowing that Daniel was true and faithful to his God. They go back to Daniel's house and catch him praying as normal to God, spending time with God, and they rush back to the king and say, hey, king, don't you remember you put into effect this 30-day law that nobody could worship anything other than you? And he said, well, yeah. And says, that's on the books. That can't be revoked. And so they say, well, listen, king, guess what? Your Daniel is doing that right now. He's praying to his God. And he says that man Daniel, one of the captives from Judah, and they're trying to make him the bad guy. That exile, that Jewish guy, the one from Judah. He can't be loyal to you. From Judah and exile. And he's up there praying to his God, which goes against what you just enacted. And so he says, they're saying, he's still praying to his God 3 times a day. Well, in verse 14, and this says a lot about the king. Here it is, the king was very angry with himself for signing the law, and he tried to find a way to save Daniel. He spent the rest of the day looking for a way to get Daniel out of this predicament. So the king, all of a sudden, the light comes on, and he said, wow, I have been scammed. These guys tricked me into signing this, knowing full well that Daniel, my trusted man. In fact, it says that the king chose Daniel, and he even had Daniel lined up to be the 3rd in line of the kingdom. If you go back and read first part of chapter 6. And so he was upset with himself. I can't believe I was hornswoggled into this predicament, and now my most trusted man is in danger for a law that I unknowingly, without clear thought, signed, and it's his death warrant because he is being caught red-handed. And not only that, not only was the king upset, said that he spent the rest of the day going through the law books, finding anything that could excuse Daniel from this death sentence, but he could not. Now, it was normal for when something was enacted and the laws have been broken, that the one that was found guilty would suffer the consequences that evening. And so Darius spent all day trying to find something, a way out, but he couldn't. And so he is basically going to have to resign himself that Daniel's a goner. So that's where we come up to the next part of the lesson. The door shut. This is Daniel 6, verses 15 through 18. In the evening, the men went together to the king and said, this is the same guys that duped the king into signing this law. It says, your majesty knows that according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no law that the king signs can be changed. So at last the king gave orders for Daniel to be arrested and thrown into the den of the lions. Now, back in Nebuchadnezzar, they did the furnace thing. Remember, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego was in the furnace. Well, the Medes, fire was one of their gods, so they didn't want to desecrate fire with punishing a guilty person. So they had the lion's den. So it says, so he was thrown into the lions, to the den of lions. And the king said to him, may your God, whom you worship continually, rescue you. Verse 17, a stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed the stone with his own royal seal and the seals of his nobles, so that no one could rescue Daniel from the lions. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night fasting. He refused his usual entertainment and couldn't sleep at all that night. So here the king is caught between a rock and a hard place. He had to follow through with Daniel's punishment. So they put him in the lion's den. But what is neat is that the king hollers out to Daniel, may your God whom you worship continually rescue you. It was out of Darius's hands now. He realized that. And so the only other thing he knew that Daniel could grasp onto, to hold on to, anything that could help him through this time, was his God, was Daniel's God. May your God, whom you worship continually, rescue you. That says a lot to me, that this king, he realized how big Daniel's king was. I'm sure he read transcripts of the interpretations that Daniel had done for Nebuchadnezzar and for Belshazzar. And so he's reaching out to Daniel, and to me he's saying, you know, Daniel, keep the faith that you've had, that you've showed continually in your God. And so they throw him down, and then they seal it. And it talks about how they put a stone over the entrance and then put clay around the edge, or around the stone. And then they put the king's seal, and usually the king's seal either had a ring with maybe some design in it or a stamp. But it said not only the kings, but all the guys who plotted all this put their seals on it. So basically it was saying, keep out, no trespassing. you cannot enter here. This is a done deal. And so now we've got the trap set. Now we got the door shut, and Daniel's in the lion's den. Now we have the tables turned. This is chapter 6, verses 19 through 24. So now the king, he couldn't sleep. Said he wasn't hungry. He didn't want any of his entertainment. He was concerned about Daniel. His worry was for Daniel. He didn't sleep all night. Then it said, verse 19, very early the next morning, the king hurried out to the lion's den. And when he got there, he called out in anguish, Daniel, servant of the living God, was your God, whom you worship continually, able to rescue you from the lions? Verse 21, Daniel answered, long live the king. My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths so that they would not hurt me. For I have been found innocent in his sight, and I have not wronged you, your majesty. The king was overjoyed and ordered that Daniel be lifted from the den, and not a scratch was found on him because he had trusted in his God. Verse 24, then the king gave orders to arrest the men who had maliciously accused Daniel. He had them thrown into the lion's den along with their wives and children. The lions leaped on them and tore them apart before they could even hit the floor of the den. All right, let's go back. So the king, been up all night, worried about Daniel. Early in the morning, as soon as it was light, he rushes to the lion's den. And he hollers out, Daniel, servant of the living God, was your God, whom you worship continually, able to rescue you. That was the last thing the king said to Daniel. May your God, who you worship continually, rescue you, save you. And this is the first thing out of his mouth. Are you there? Did your God come through for you? And so Daniel answered, long live the king. My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths so that they would not hurt me. For I have been found innocent in his sight. God found him innocent of this crime. And then he goes on to say, and I have not wronged you, your majesty. So Daniel's saying, and I'm innocent in your sight. I did not wrong you. I was following my true self by worshiping my God at the times I always do, but it was not a traitorous act to you. It was not a snub to you. I meant no offense. I still serve you. I have served you up to now, and I will continue to serve you. I am faithful and loyal to you, but I am more faithful and loyal to my God. That who comes first. But I did not betray you in any way. And so this is a relief for the king. I mean, I could hear this big sigh coming from him. All his fears about these lions tearing him apart. Then it says, then the king, verse 23, was overjoyed in order that Daniel be lifted from the den, and not a scratch was found on him because he had trusted in his God. Let's go back to Nebuchadnezzar and Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego in the furnace. How they come out? Nothing was singed. Not a piece of clothing, not a hair was harmed on them. They didn't even smell the smoke because they had faith in their God to deliver them. And he did that. He delivered them. And now we have Daniel coming through a den of lions, hungry lions, which I'll point out here in a minute. Not a thing was ripped. Not a hair on him was harmed. Not a scratch. And it's because of Daniel's faith that God would deliver him. And I look back on Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego when they told King Nebuchadnezzar, King, we believe our God will deliver us. But if he doesn't, if we get burned up, it's okay, because we know where we're going. We have a heavenly home. We're trusting God. He's going to deliver us one way or the other. He's either going to deliver us out of this furnace till we continue to serve you, or he's going to deliver us into his presence because of our faith. And this is, to me, this is what Daniel was saying, is that, whether I escape these lions, or whether God shuts their mouths and I live, or whether I get torn apart, I'm staying true to my God, and he will deliver me one way or the other. Now, the tables turn. This is the part. So, verse 24. And so then the king gave orders to arrest the man who had maliciously accused Daniel. I'm sure the king was upset. I mean, after seeing Daniel was delivered and everything, the idea that he had been conned and duped into doing this against one of his most trusted guys, I'm sure he is pretty hacked off. He was pretty mad. And so what's he do? He turns the tables on them. He turns around and said, okay, you, the ones who brought this to me, who conned me into doing this, endangering Daniel's life, you're going to pay with your lives. And not only you, but your wives and your children. Now that may seem harsh, but it was a practice in those days that if you had an enemy, not only did you kill that person, but you got rid of their family, so that later on down the line, family members wouldn't take revenge upon what you had done to their loved one. And so he threw them all into the lion's den. We don't know how many there was. We know, or we're pretty sure that, well, I can't say that. It is suggested that, not all these princes and everything of the 120 provinces were involved in this scheme, but some were, and these are the ones that got punished. And so it says that they were thrown in along with their wives and children, and the lions leaped on them and tore them apart before they even hit the floor of the den. So what is highlighted to me here is that these lions were hungry from the start. And it wasn't that they weren't hungry or that they were, on a diet or anything. They would have devoured Daniel just like these people if it hadn't been for the intervention of God. But it said that they even leaped up and grabbed these people and killed them before they even hit the bottom. And so God is intervening in Daniel's life so that he can continue and serve him and showing these kings and the Babylonians or the Medes right now that he serves a mighty God. And so it goes on. And then, so we have Daniel rescued. And verse 25 says, then King Darius sent this message to the people of every race and nation and language throughout the world. Peace and prosperity to you. I decree that everyone throughout my kingdom should tremble with fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he will endure forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his rule will never end. He rescues and saves his people. He performs miraculous signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Now, I want to go back for a minute. And it talks about Nebuchadnezzar praising God when he got his sanity back, when God restored his mind to what it was, and he no longer grazed with the cattle or slept naked in that wild. It said after Nebuchadnezzar, in verse 34 of chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar is praising God. And it said that my Santa returned, and I praise and worship the Most High God and honor the one who lives forever. His rule is everlasting, and his kingdom is eternal. All the peoples of the earth are nothing compared to him. He has the power to do as he pleases. Among the angels of heavens and with those who live on earth, no one can challenge him or stop him, saying, what do you mean by doing these things? And so basically, it's what Nebuchadnezzar said, it's what Darius said. Daniel's God is mighty. No one can compare to him. And his kingdom will reign forever. It said, for he is the living God, and he will endure forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his rule will never end. Through Daniel, God has worked through Nebuchadnezzar. Now he's worked through Darius. And we don't know the relationship that these kings had with God. We don't know if they were saved or not. But the thing is that through Daniel, God has shown these guys that there's someone mightier than they are. They may have the biggest kingdom in the world, the biggest army in the world. They may have riches galore, but their power cannot compare to God's. And God is being glorified through Daniel and his life. And so what I get out of this is that God will deliver us through our trials. We may not be delivered in the way that we think we should be. We may be scratched. We may not come out completely unharmed. In fact, it may even cost us our lives standing up for our God, living our life for him. But the thing is, he will deliver us, either come through without a scratch or give our lives for him and meet him face to face in heaven. But either way, he is with us. He will see us through whatever we have going on in our lives. And this is what I get from this, that we can trust God. We can have confidence in God in all that he says and does, and that he keeps every promise he's ever made. Say a word of prayer. Dear God, I just thank you for this time in your word, dear Lord. I just ask you to help me apply what I have gained from studying this lesson, dear God, is that regardless, you're with us, and that we just need to rely upon you to see us through, dear Lord. Help me, dear God, to have the faith and the strength to do that. And dear God, I just ask that all that I do will be pleasing to you, and that my life will give you praise. Thank you, Lord. We love you. Amen. Next week, future scene. Daniel 7, verses 1 through 14. Future scene. Daniel 7, 1 through 14. Y'all stay safe and well. We'll see you next Sunday. God bless you, and we love you. Bye-bye.